Coming up on The World Today. A BBC investigation reveals scale of operations by a Russian mercenary group in Libya's civil war. At least 2 people dead, many more still trapped under debris following a landslide in India's Himachal Pradesh. Plus, more deaths recorded as wildfires continue tearing through northern Algeria. A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Thank you for joining us on the program today. I'm Layo Adegoke in Lagos. We begin with what has become the clearest account so far of external involvement into Libya's crisis, as a new BBC investigation reveals the scale of operations by a so-called Russian mercenary group known as the Wagner Group, which includes links to war crimes and the Russian military. It's all thanks to a Samsung tablet left behind by a fighter for the group, which contains maps in Russian of the front line, giving information of Wagner's significant presence and unprecedented insight into the group's operations. It also contains drone footage and code names of Wagner fighters, at least one of whom the BBC believes it has identified. It provides evidence of the mercenary involvement in the mining and booby trapping of civilian areas. Placing landmines without marking them is a war crime. The tablet is said to be in a secure location, and Russia has denied any links to Wagner. The Wagner Group was first identified in 2014 when it was backing pro-Russian separatists in the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Since then, it's been involved in regions including Syria, Mozambique, Sudan, and the Central African Republic. We'll have more on that story, but in the meantime, police in Germany have arrested a British man who worked at the British embassy in Berlin on suspicion of passing documents to the Russian intelligence service in exchange for cash. German prosecutors say the apartment and workplace of the man, identified as David S., had been searched and would be brought before an investigation judge later today. The Chief Federal Prosecutor's Office said in a statement that on at least one occasion, he passed on documents he had obtained in the course of his professional activities to a representative of a Russian intelligence service. It says the accused received cash in as yet unknown amount for his transmission of information. Rescuers in India's Himachal Pradesh state are hoping to find more survivors trapped under debris in a huge landslide that has already killed 2 people. 5 people have been rescued, and they believe at least 30 people are still trapped. A truck, a passenger bus, and other vehicles are said to be under falling boulders as we speak. India has been experiencing several deadly landslides in recent months in an unusually heavy monsoon season. Now, it's not clear what caused today's, but it happened on a highway in Kinnaur district. Indo-Tibetan border police teams have been dispatched to help with rescue efforts, and the National Disaster Response Force has also been put on alert. Over in Turkey, floods caused by unusually heavy rainfall today struck the northern coast, tearing down a bridge and leaving villages without power after some of the biggest wildfires in the country's history ravaged the southwest. State media says 1 person died from a heart attack in the northern province of Bartın, and emergency workers are looking for another person who was missing. 13 people were also injured after a bridge collapsed in Bartın, and there were power outages in at least 12 villages. Turkey's north is prone to flash floods in the summer when rains are particularly strong. Last year, at least 5 people were killed in the floods in the region. Rising temperatures are making it difficult for firefighters to contain blazes in Italy's island of Sicily. Temperatures have risen as high as 46 degrees Celsius today. The fire brigade say they have carried out more than 300 interventions over the past 12 hours in 2 regions, despite the temperatures and strong winds. Forest fires have been active for days in the Tuon of Petriala Soprana, near Sicily's capital Palermo. Witness video showed firefighters extinguishing the blaze during the night as teams were deployed to protect homes near the flames, and later cattle were seen walking down the road away from the fires. We're still talking more fires over in Algeria. It's a case of rising death toll from the wildfires tearing through areas in the north. Numbers have risen beyond 60 as the government deploys the army to help fight the fires which have burnt most fiercely in the mountainous Kabylie region. Among the dead, 28 soldiers with another 12 critically injured with burns. Forest fires have set large parts of Algeria, Turkey and Greece aflame over the past week, and a European Union atmosphere monitor said the Mediterranean had become a wildfire hotspot, aided by increasingly hot weather. Dozens of separate fires have raged through forest areas across northern Algeria since Monday, and on Tuesday, Interior Minister Kamel Beljoud has accused arsonists of igniting the flames without providing any evidence. Well, let's get back to our top story for today. A BBC investigation revealing the scale of operations by a Russian mercenary group in Libya's civil war. Let's talk to security expert David Otto now. He joins us from London. Mr. Otto, a pleasure having you on the program. What are you thinking as regards the kind of information being gleaned from this tablet relating to the war in Libya?
I think it will be very vital to look at this information. First of all, the BBC report makes mention of Russian mercenaries, and I think it has to be made very clear that there is nothing like the Wagner group, which has been mentioned in so many of these occasions. But it so much depends very much on who actually owned this tablet, whether it was a middle commander or it was a high-level strategic commander. But if that were the case, then what we'll be looking at is names of mercenaries that were registered under this particular group. I mean, I use the word group because, there are so many mercenaries that operate in Libya. But of course, you'd be able to find plans. You'd also be able to find weapons that perhaps were lined up for purchase, or target list of individuals that could have been eliminated or assassinated by this group. There is also a possibility that you find the country of origins of these mercenaries and some of their salaries. Now, but again, it very much depends on squarely on what kind of information is found. But I think what is very clear is that there is a clear indication that over 10 years since the 2001 Arab Spring, 2011 Arab Spring, Libya is still in chaos. Divided between the government of national accord in Tripoli, but also the eastern-based government under the Libyan National Army of General Khalifa Haftar. So it shows a lot of separation, not just mercenaries in the country. There are terrorists, there are militias, smugglers. So it's a demonstration of how chaotic Libya has been since 2011.
BBC says the types of state-of-the-art military equipment listed on that tablet are consistent with the types that come from Russia. But now Russia has denied any links to the group. What could happen or what should happen if and when it is proven that these military equipment did come from Russia?
I think, again, what our viewers need to really understand is that none of this group is directly linked to Russia. I mean, again, as you rightly mentioned, Russia has any of these allegations. Libya has been under a UN, arms embargo, and supplying arms to any of the factions, be it the Libyan National Army or the government of national accord in Tripoli or any of the militias, would be against international law, and this has to be made very clear. Now, whether it is Russia alone that is involved in these mercenary activities is something that one has to look very closely. I think, remember, in 2019, the United Nations did mention that, Eric Prince, who used to be, of course, a former U.S. ex-Navy SEAL, he was also, being linked, then I think, directly under the Trump administration, because, Eric Prince's brother was Betsy Vox, who was the former education secretary. So it's not just Russia that is involved, if indeed these mercenaries are, linked to the Russian administration. Using mercenaries is something that has been very common. I mean, even the United States had used some of mercenaries in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq to fight against Al-Qaeda and of course, the Islamic State. So using mercenaries is very common. We've seen that being used in Central African Republic. We saw it in the 90s in Sierra Leone. We've seen it in Mozambique, where there is still this accusation of Wagner Group being involved in these activities. But because none of these groups are linked directly to any government, there is little one can do, against them, to take them to any international court or something. This is what lawlessness and disorder, brings to a country.
Thank you so much, security expert David Otto. Thank you for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you.
Well, let's check in on Afghanistan, where government forces are barely holding it down against the Taliban taking over major cities. The insurgency increased with U.S. and other foreign forces withdrawal from the country. And despite the growing security concern, U.S. President Joe Biden, who ordered complete withdrawal of the U.S. troops by September 11, says he has no regrets. He was addressing reporters at the White House on Tuesday, saying the U.S. was keeping the commitments it had made to Afghanistan, such as providing close air support, paying military salaries, and supplying Afghan forces with food and equipment. And now they've got to fight for themselves.
The Taliban took control of another city in northern Afghanistan today, taking the number of provincial capitals to fall to 8 in just 6 days. Afghan fighters seized Faisalabad, the capital of northeastern province Badakhshan, that far northeastern province that borders Tajikistan, Pakistan, and China. Soldiers from Tajikistan were joined by forces from Russia and Uzbekistan to conduct military drills on Tuesday, just 12 miles from the Afghan border. Tajikistan's Minister of Defense laments the deteriorating situation along the border. As US-led forces complete their withdrawal and Taliban forces close in on the biggest city in the north, the militants aim to defeat President Ashraf Ghani's US-supported government and reimpose strict Islamic law. The speed of the advance has shocked the government and its allies. Meanwhile, the Greek migration minister says the European Union is not in a position to deal with the repeat of the migration crisis in 2015 and must try to keep people from fleeing the growing conflict in Afghanistan.
We understand the difficult situation faced in Afghanistan, and we need, as the European Union, to take a more active role in preventing a crisis in Afghanistan. However, stopping return of those not entitled to international protection would send the wrong message. At this time of difficulty for Afghanistan, it would lead more people trying to leave and come to the European Union.
Taliban forces now control 65% of Afghanistan and have taken or threatened to take the provincial capitals. Government officials have appealed for pressure on Pakistan to stop Taliban reinforcements and supplies flowing over the border. However, Pakistan denies backing the Taliban.
We'll have more on this story plus. When we return after the break on The World Today, heard about doppelgangers. Famous world footballer Lionel Messi has won, and he's here in Africa. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program. We'll continue with one of our leading stories, the war in Afghanistan. U.S. President Joe Biden says he has no regrets on the withdrawal of U.S. troops. We have joining us now for more on this, foreign policy expert Calvin Dark in Washington for us. Calvin, interesting, isn't it, that the Americans claim to have adequately prepared the Afghan forces against the Taliban, and now this is happening. Does President Biden's remark about the current invasion spell responsibility?
Well, I think when you think about how the U.S. has categorized it, that they've adequately prepared, I think a more accurate interpretation of that is the U.S. has done all that it intends to do. During his comments, the president made he reminded people that more than $1 trillion, trained over 300,000 Afghan forces, I believe. So I think that's kind of what the U.S. meant. Now, when it comes to responsibility, there's a saying we have here in the United States that many have always applied to the situation in Afghanistan. That is, you break it, you buy it. So no matter what the U.S. does from this point on, anything negative that happens in Afghanistan will very necessarily be attached to the U.S. presence there for 20 years.
Now, the Taliban is in control of 9 out of 34 Afghan provincial capitals, and they are threatening more. Neighboring Pakistan and Turkmenistan are beefing up security at their borders, and it appears the Afghan forces are weakening against these insurgents. Afghans are very concerned about their future. What is it going to be for the U.S. legacy in the region?
Well, I think that there is reason to be concerned for Afghans in the country, but also in the region, because that instability there does nothing but add instability to neighboring areas that are dealing with their own crises. So I do think there's legitimate worry about what will happen with the Taliban and Afghan forces. Now, when it comes to the U.S. role, that remains to be seen. It also remains to be seen how the U.S. is going to cooperate with European partners to see what this next phase of involvement in Afghanistan looks like from a Western and U.S. point of view.
Finally, Calvin, how can we describe the U.S. foreign policy towards Afghanistan at the moment?
Well, I think the policy that we've come to know of the presence there, the $1 trillion, the 20 years, the 300,000 Afghan forces trained, that's over, or it almost is. And I think the official date is August 31st. What the U.S. policy towards Afghanistan and the region going forward looks like, no one really knows. It could be more air support. It will include supplies, monetary, but it won't be a presence there, because one of the things that President Biden and his supporters on both sides of the aisle here have said that the U.S. is getting out, and then they will deal with whatever happens in the next phase of U.S. policy toward Afghanistan. So that remains to be seen.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Calvin, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
The Canadian ambassador to China, Dominic Barton, has condemned the sentencing of Canadian businessman Michael Spavor to 11 years in prison for espionage and called for his immediate release. Ambassador Barton had visited Spavor at a detention center in northern China following the verdict. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had commented on the sentencing, describing it as absolutely unacceptable and unjust. The espionage cases are embroiled in a wider diplomatic spat involving Washington and Beijing, and Spavor's sentencing comes as lawyers in Canada, representing the chief financial officer of Chinese telecoms giant Huawei, make a final push to convince a court not to extradite her to the United States.
We condemn, in the strongest possible terms, this decision rendered after a legal process that lacked both fairness and transparency. Our thoughts are with Michael and his family during this difficult time. We maintained from the beginning that Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are being detained arbitrarily, and we will continue to call for their immediate release. And we will continue to work tirelessly to secure their freedom. That will be doubled down to continue that. Our collective presence and voice sends a strong signal to China and the Chinese government in particular that all the eyes of the world are watching.
Dominic Vartan there, the Canadian ambassador to China. Checking in on Russian critic Alexei Navalny now, who faces a new criminal charge of establishing an organization that incited Russians to break the law. This was disclosed by an investigative committee which probes major crimes. Navalny is already serving a 2.5-year sentence for role violations he says were trumped up. He was arrested back in January after he flew back from Germany, where he had been recovering from a nerve agent poisoning. The new crime is punishable by up to 3 years in jail. Well, here in Africa, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has rejected criticism he was complacent about corruption allegations during the rule of his predecessor, Jacob Zuma. He was given evidence before the country's long-running Zondo Commission, an inquiry investigating state corruption. It was set up to look into allegations that Zuma allowed the wealthy Gupta family to plunder state resources while he was in office, which cost South Africa $81 billion in public funds and lost opportunities. Mr. Ramaphosa was deputy leader of the country and the governing African National Congress, ANC, for some of this time.
The first option for me was to resign. The second would have been to speak out. And the third would have been to acquiesce and abet and just go along. And the fourth would have been to keep quiet and remain silent. And the fifth option would have been to remain, but to resist, hoping that we can turn things around. Ordinary people abhor corruption, and they've not always seen the ANC as taking action against those in its own ranks who have been involved in corrupt acts. But now...
Finally, on the program today, here's one for the sports fans. Barcelona may be mourning its loss of star player Lionel Messi to Paris Saint-Germain, just as hearts are breaking all over the world. At least those of us here in Africa can take comfort in the fact that Messi is with us here in Egypt.
27-year-old painter from the humble town of Zagazig in Egypt's Sharqiya Governorate, Bata, says that Barcelona will experience a great loss as the international star changes course.
I was hoping that Messi would have stayed at Barcelona. Barcelona is Messi. And since Messi left Barcelona and Barcelona gave Messi up, Barcelona really lost. They lost Messi's skills on the soccer field. They really lost a lot.
Messi bade an emotional farewell to Barcelona on Sunday in a tearful press conference after the club were unable to finalize a new contract after his previous deal expired on June 30th.
If I was Messi, the club that I would have preferred to play for is the club that appreciates its players and would have appreciated me. The club that I would see myself in is PSG, and PSG signed with Messi, I think.
Bata's friend says the Spanish club Barcelona have lost a legend.
Barcelona definitely lost a lot because Messi is a legend, and historically it is difficult to find someone like him again. He is a Ballon d'Or winner and won it 6 times. His main competitor is Cristiano Ronaldo. Ronaldo is somewhere, and Messi is on a whole other level. It is hard for Barcelona to find someone like Messi in the coming period, and even after a long period of time. Messi's leaving will have a huge impact on Barcelona. Barcelona will really be affected by Messi. He achieved so much at Barcelona. Most of Barcelona's achievements are by Messi right now.
In spite of his disappointment, Batar says if he were the real Messi, he would join PSG, a club that Batar says appreciates its players.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.